Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to talk about the movies. I am Sky Jatani. Joining me, as always, is Josh Lindsay.
Hello.
This is episode 9 of the movie proposal. We are going to, in a moment, talk about Rogue One, a Star Wars story, but we have to follow our format. So before we get into Rogue One, we are going to start with something old. By the way, because the podcast is fairly new to the public, if you are unfamiliar with it, we do something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. So Josh, what's your something old this week?
All right, so we're in the realm of prequels. So I went to one of my favorites, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
Okay.
Which has been changed. The name changed. They went from that to now the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones.
I think I was browsing through on Amazon Prime the other day, and I saw that they're up there.
Yes, I was looking to see how I could watch it. I don't have Amazon Prime, but yes, it's available there. This was back in 1992 and 93. They did 28 episodes. And if I remember correctly, well, first of all, there were 3 actors that played Indiana Jones.
Really?
An old, retired Indiana Jones who had a patch over one of his eyes, a teenage Indiana Jones, and then a kid.
And that was not River Phoenix.
It was not River Phoenix. As an actor who's not really, I mean, he's still acting, but he's not doing it. He's not really famous today. But I loved it. And what was so great about it is every other week, one week would be young Indiana, like the kid. And so he would go on these adventures with his parents on archaeological digs, and he'd meet famous people like Teddy Roosevelt. It's very historical, and he'd get into trouble and so forth. But he was a real smart kid.
And Sean Connery does not play his father.
That is correct.
Okay.
All different actors. This is a television show, by the way. So, and then the next week it would be the teenager, and he was more, on his own, adventurous.
Ladies' man.
Yeah. In fact, one of the best episodes was a love story between him and this girl. But it was so much fun, and like I said, I think it was only 2 seasons. Go to Amazon Prime. Great series.
All right. And that's a Lucasfilm thing, too. Didn't George Lucas executive produce it or do something with it?
Well, I don't know exactly what he had to do with young Indiana Jones, but I'm sure he had something because
he helped create Indiana Jones with Steven Spielberg.
Which is amazing to me that he is responsible for Star Wars and Indiana Jones. I mean,
that's a case of a broken watch being right twice a day.
Well, talk about being right.
Yeah. Okay, my something old, I was inspired by all the news this week about possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin and the Russians. And it just feels like the Cold War is kind of heating up again. So one of my favorite Cold War movies comes from 1990, and that is The Hunt for Red October.
Oh, great film.
Yeah, I love that movie. Sean Connery plays a rogue submarine captain, Soviet submarine captain, who has this amazing new submarine, and he wants to hand it over to the Americans because he realizes that the only reason this sub was created was to start a war. There's a lot of kind of interesting parallels here to Rogue One. And Alec Baldwin plays a young Jack Ryan. He's the first film Jack Ryan. And when I say young Alec Baldwin, like...
almost unrecognizable.
Unrecognizably young, handsome. Even his voice was different.
Yeah,
and it's just hysterical that he now plays Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live.
That's a good point.
But it's a great Cold War, whodunit kind of espionage. It's just a great movie. I thoroughly like it. And it's based on the Tom Clancy novel that kicked off all the Jack Ryan
Which
kind of stuff.
I tried to read it after seeing that movie. I couldn't. But John McTiernan, I'm going to correct me, how do you say his name? John McTiernan?
I don't know.
He directed it.
Okay.
Which he's also responsible for other movies. Help me out, Jason. Like
John McTiernan?
Yeah. Did he do Die Hard?
Here, I'm looking. I actually have the MB.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
IMBD thing.
But yeah, it's a great action film.
Yeah, he did the Die Hard movies, Rollerball, the Thomas Crown Affair.
He is currently working on Untitled John McTiernan Project.
Fantastic.
Medicine Man, Predator. Yeah, so...
Back in the day when I saw this film, for extra money I babysat, and there's these 3 boys I would watch on a fairly regular basis. And so to put them to bed, I acted out the entire Hunt for October movie for them.
Wow.
And they loved it. It was great.
They didn't know better.
No, they still talk about it to this day. It was fantastic.
Okay. All right, so there are something old. The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, whatever the new title is, and The Hunt for Red October. Fantastic entertainment. Go watch them. Okay, on to the main course here. Something new. We both, again, separately saw
I saw it with my two oldest kids.
I saw it with my middle son.
Okay.
The only one who cares about Star Wars in my household. Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Long anticipated movie. The couple background things. This is the first, really the first legitimate Star Wars spin-off movie that is not one of the episodes in line, as they call it now, the Star Wars saga, which is all about the Skywalkers, Luke and Anakin and all that sort of thing. So it's a side story, and a lot of people weren't sure how this was going to go. And what else was important to know about this going into it?
I don't know where you're headed.
I don't know. I'm sure I was going either. But anyway, this is like the most anticipated movie of the year.
It was.
Okay. So, Josh, your proposal.
All right, I propose.
And we have not talked about this at all.
Yes, I have not
So
talked
I have no
to you.
idea what you're going to say.
Which, real quick, the whole thing for me that kicked off this podcast was seeing The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it with my two oldest kids. It was great. But I had no one to talk to about this film. It was killing me. So I called Scott.
Yeah,
I'm
we
like,
went
can
out
we
for
meet for
lunch.
coffee
Yeah.
just so I can talk to someone about this? I got off my chest. I'm like, whew, I feel better now.
Yeah, I say I'm like a movie pastor.
You are.
Like a counselor to help people with their movie problems.
Yes, thank you for
The
that.
podcast awakens.
Right.
That's right. So I was excited about that for this reason, but this is my proposal. I propose that Rogue One is the prequel we had wanted 17 years ago.
Okay. See, now my proposal, I had two parts to mine. My first proposal is that Rogue Awakens is the prequel we have been looking for.
Rogue Awakens?
I mean, sorry, Rogue One. Rogue One is the prequel we have been looking for.
Right.
But secondly, and this is where I want to get into a little critique, I would also argue that Rogue One is the most morally ambiguous Star Wars movie
Oh.
that we have
This will be
had so
interesting.
far. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it sounds like we have a similar.
Yeah.
So,
Go for it.
all right. Well, for me, you cannot watch or have a new Star Wars film come out and expect it to be as good as the original three, Star Wars,
Empire.
and Return of the Jedi. It was, and so when the prequels came out, that was exciting, but I was convinced it couldn't be as good, but I was convinced it would be good.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, we don't have to get into it, but they were disappointing. I haven't watched them in forever. I don't really have any interest in watching them. I kind of forgot about them. And it was disappointing because what I wanted to see in those films was a fun adventure film reminding me of some of the characters from Star Wars and Empire and that sort of thing. Seeing glimpses of things, that are familiar in the Star Wars universe, being introduced to characters that you heard about but never saw before, and then just be entertained and go home, right?
Right.
And that didn't happen in those three for me. This one, it was a great adventure film, action film, where it was fun to see glimpses of things like the stuff they drink, and
Right. We should say up front, there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this
Yes.
discussion. So if you haven't seen the movie and you want to see the movie, stop and go see the movie. But I'm not holding back spoilers for you, so deal with it.
All right.
Okay.
So seeing those things like, and I don't remember their names, but I call him Walrus Man and then the ugly dude from the bar.
Right. We have the
Evazan.
death penalty on 12 systems.
There you
So
go.
that
That's
guy,
right.
yeah.
Seeing
Ponda
those guys,
Barba.
that was so much fun to see that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
To see Darth Vader, and we should probably talk about Darth Vader in a minute. I got chills watching that
Okay.
scene.
I have a theory that no matter how long was that movie? A little over 2 hours.
About 2 hours.
250.
For an hour and 59 minutes, none of it mattered. Because the last minute of the movie, last 90 seconds, 2 minutes of the movie, whatever it was, had that scene with Darth Vader.
Yeah.
That made every fanboy like orgasmic with excitement, right? So I think if they had completely screwed up the 2 hours before that, all would have been forgiven.
Yeah.
Because of that one scene with Darth Vader. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I mean, it was a great moment.
Yeah.
I was thrilled they did it, but I think I've been watching a lot of reviews online, and I think so many people were so excited about that final scene of the movie that, in my opinion, I think they're overlooking some blemishes on the rest of the film. I think it's a great movie.
But that goes back to my point of like you can't expect it to be that great of a film to begin with because you're holding it up against Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. To me, I was enjoying the ride, and I thought I was about to end. I was ready to get off the ride. I'm like, all right, I was satisfied, and I totally caught me off guard. I had no idea that was coming. Wow. I mean, I would go back to see it just for that scene.
I think that's what they're banking on. I think that's exactly what they're banking on.
Yeah.
Okay, here's how I felt regarding the prequels. We could spend hours and hours and hours talking about all the deficiencies of the prequel movies, episodes 1, 2, and 3. I mean, they were horrible on so many levels. But what bothered me the most about the prequels is I felt like George Lucas didn't even pay attention to episodes 4, 5, and 6 when he went back to write 1, 2, and 3. For example, two things I'll point out. In episode 4, the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, what Obi-Wan Kenobi is wearing when he's a hermit out on Tatooine is the same thing that Uncle Owen is wearing while he's a moisture farmer out on Tatooine. It's just like what you wear when you're living out in Tatooine in the wilderness, right?
Oh,
but George Lucas takes those costumes and he makes them the official Jedi costumes in episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Then why was Uncle Owen wearing that in episode 4? It makes no sense. So it's clear he didn't pay attention to his own movies to make sure there was a continuity that worked. Another example from Return of the Jedi. Luke and Leia find out they're brother and sister, and Luke asks Leia, do you have any memory of your mother? And she has some vague early memories of her mother, implying that she spent some time with her mother before she died when she was young. But yet in episode 3, when they're born, their mother dies right away, and Leia has no time with her mother. So you're like, come on, like at least construct a story that fits the one that you...
Is she referring to the adopted mother?
I think it's the adopted mother.
No. She's talking about her birth mother.
Pretty sure.
Oh no, because she had many years with her adopted mother. She's asking about her.
When did her adopted mother
Because
die,
then Luke says, I have no memory of my mother.
But weren't they separated?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the point. She was speaking about her birth mother.
Yeah.
Leia was.
Well, who she thought her birth mother was.
No, she's talking about her birth mother.
Did she know she was adopted?
Yes, she did.
Did she?
Yes, she did.
Is the guy from L.A. Law? Is he the
Jimmy Smith?
Is he the one who
He's
raised
Bail
her?
Organa.
And
Yeah,
he raised.
right.
Okay.
So my point is and that's just two brief examples. There are numerous other ones.
The costumes and a discrepancy.
Well, like here's another one. They talk about how Obi-Wan shares about how Darth Vader hunted down and killed the Jedi.
Yeah.
Like I'm going, that's a huge part of the story.
That'd be great to see.
That would have been great to see in episode 3. All you see is him going into a nursery with a bunch of kids, and next thing you know, you're told they're dead. That's like not hunting down the Jedi.
Right.
I think all of episode 3 should have been Darth Vader hunting down the Jedi.
That would be good.
Right. So there's all these great story elements that are referred to in 4, 5, and 6 that Lucas just is so sloppy about. Right? It was horrible. So getting to my point. Rogue One, you can tell, was created and written by fans of the original movies. And they worked meticulously to make sure that they were clearly linked to the original movies.
Yeah.
And so, for example, one of the things that has always stood out about the original Star Wars was, okay, come on, a photon torpedo in that little exhaust port's going to destroy the entire Death Star. Like, isn't that a little bit of an... Like, they were smart enough to go, actually, that design flaw was implanted in there deliberately, and they linked that to theirs. Like there was very meticulous attention paid to making sure that Rogue One fit with the continuity of A New Hope, of Episode 4. Like it works. It works really, really well. And that kind of attention, it just angers me that George Lucas didn't pay that close attention when he wrote 1, 2, and 3 to make sure it all fit. So I felt like this worked. And then, of course, it just as a movie, it works. Like it's entertaining, it's fun, it grabs you emotionally here and there. I don't think it's quite as deeply as the original Star Wars movies did because there isn't enough character development. But I'm definitely going to go see this movie again.
Yeah,
like for sure. But I do want to talk about what I think could have been better.
Did you say morally ambiguous?
Yes.
Is that what you're getting to?
Yeah, I think it was a morally ambiguous Star Wars
Let's
movie.
hear it.
So, okay, going back to the original Star Wars movies again, it was always the dark side is bad, the light side is good, the Rebel Alliance is good, the Empire is bad. Okay. There was no ambiguity about that. If there was any moral ambiguity, it was maybe with Han Solo. But he's introduced, if you buy the original cut of the film, killing Greedo in the cantina, and it's like...
He shot first.
Yeah, he shot first, and he's a mercenary, and he's out for himself, and he's but he's not like part of the Rebel Alliance at that point. He's just this independent smuggler. And you go, okay, he's supposed to be a scoundrel, but everyone else is either good or bad, and it's not ambiguous at all. In Rogue One, they definitely blur those lines. And so I want to read you something. This was an interview that Gareth Edwards, the director of Rogue One, gave. And here's what he said. This is a quote. "When they first made Star Wars in the 1970s, the world maybe felt a bit simpler. With the internet and global connection," he said, "we know deep down that it's not as simple as that." And this article goes on to talk about how Rogue One kind of fits with today's media world, where we have Breaking Bad and House of Cards and even Iron Man, who has all these weird issues, and making everything more gray. So one of the main characters of Rogue One is this Cassian Andor. What's his name? Andor. And he works for the Alliance, Rebel Alliance. Intelligence officer. And he like flat out just kills guys that aren't very useful. And I get it. Like, they're building into his character, and he's going to assassinate Jin's father. But it's clear that the Rebel Alliance is not as squeaky clean as they're made out to be. And part of me is like, well, it adds some texture and dimension to the whole thing. I get it. But it also, you see the Rebel Alliance, like, they're all arguing with one another about what's the right strategy here, and do you do this or do you do that? And part of it was refreshing. I go, okay, yeah, that's kind of more realistic. That's how the church is, right? It's how people are. But I thought some of the charm of the original Star Wars was you could take kids to a movie like this, and it's just a good old fairy tale in space of good and evil, right and wrong, good guy, black hat, white hat kind of stuff. And now we're going, oh, well, we need to make everything more morally ambiguous because the world is morally ambiguous. And you're like, oh, okay. But so that's one little, I think, interesting piece of this. And here, maybe I'm a little jaded because I went and saw the film at a movie place where you can eat dinner, and they serve you your seat and all that, which is fine. I like the place. Sitting next to us, my son was next to me, and then next to him was this mom who came in with two little girls.
Like how old?
Like kindergarten.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like little girls. They were little enough that the two of them sat in one seat. Okay, together. And the problem, what drove me up the wall, is these two little girls. First of all, it's a PG-13 movie.
Right.
I don't think it was an appropriate movie for preschoolers or kindergartners. These two little girls talked the entire movie, and not about the movie, just My Little Pony. I don't know what they were talking about the whole time. And then when like the action sequences came along and it got really loud in the theater, they just talked louder. And so the problem I have with that is I want to be able to take kids to a Star Wars movie and have it be a good morality tale.
Right.
And yet here I am watching a screen with this morally ambiguous story as I'm being irritated by these two girls, and I'm thinking about all the nasty things I want to do to them and their mother because I'm being influenced by an assassin in the Alliance.
There you go. Well, what did your son think about it?
He loved it. He thought it was fun.
All right.
But, he's 11, 12. Well, how old is he?
Did you discuss this with him?
He's 12. His birthday was on Thursday. I'm trying to get this straight.
You make me feel so
He's 12.
much better
He's
about
12.
myself.
Yeah.
The other day I was thinking, what grade is my son in?
Oh, he loved it. But he also I've never let him see the prequels.
Oh.
So this for him was his first prequel.
I met a father our age, kids our age, and he protects his kids from films like a lot of dads do, like, if it's like negative, violent or language, but he protects them from poor quality films like the prequels or something. Like he refuses like television shows that are the stupid, stuff on, Disney or whatever. He guards it like it's violence and sex, and he won't let them watch it. And I'm like, man, that is.
So they've never.
Never
I
seen
was
the prequels?
going to say something else, but
okay.
Yeah, he loved it. He thought it was great.
But you didn't? Did you have the conversation about the moral ambiguity?
Not yet. Not really. I mean, it wasn't like a huge part of the story. I don't think you walked away going, "Oh, I don't know what was right and wrong in that movie."
Right.
It wasn't that bad, but it just I felt, and I think what did is I read that article then about Gareth Edwards, the director, saying, "Hey, our goal was to make everything more gray," and I thought, "Oh, I'm not sure that I want Star Wars to be adding to more of the grayness."
Well, I think what's interesting, you brought up Han Solo, and he was just a glimpse into another world, and we only saw a smidget of it. But I think he kind of represents that world, right? Like
Yeah.
we were cheering for him when he changed his mind and he showed up
Right.
and he became part of the team, and that's ultimately
Well, and I
what
think-
happened more or less.
I
in
think if
Rogue
it was
One.
another smuggler or some side character like that, it would have been okay. But this was the Rebel Alliance itself, no longer looked as squeaky clean as you want. You know, you want to root for the good guys. Does that make sense?
It does. I would look at them as like the lower level, you know, kind of the people at the top, like the Princess Leia of the group. You know, she's the one that's gonna like steer the ship and be the righteous one. You know.
Yeah.
But
Well,
the people that work below, you know, they're
so
gonna,
it's just like the presidency.
exactly.
It's Richard Nixon, right? When the president does it, it's not illegal. That was his famous line.
Sure, that's
So,
not exactly.
but anyway, that one little thing on the moral side of it. But okay, let's talk about some of the details in the movie, like things that stood out to you as other than the Darth Vader scene at the end where he breaks bad on a whole bunch of rebel guys. Scenes or moments or characters that you thought really shined in this movie.
Do you have one in mind?
No, not necessarily. You go first.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Well, I liked the very beginning, the rain scenes with Krennic coming in, getting the father and the daughter and the mom rushing off. You know, that to me, because I like it created a sense of tension and scariness to it that got me excited. Like, what is going to happen? You know, because Krennic seems like a bad dude, and what's he going to do? So I like the opening a lot. I think just the action scenes were fantastic. I love the. Am I saying this right? AT-ATs.
This is quite a debate
Oh, okay.
about whether it's AT-ATs or AT-ATs or AT-ACTs.
Okay,
I think
good.
is the new one.
I love that. I wish there was more of that. I
Yeah.
thought there was going to be all these, kind of like in Hoth, right? In Empire Strikes Back, you just see but there really wasn't a whole lot. Like
Yeah.
what you saw in the trailer was pretty much what you saw in the movie.
Yeah.
But it's still cool to see those familiar things in there. And then, yeah, just recognizing characters like the Walrus Man, the Mon Mothma,
Yeah.
right? The guy with the white beard. Being surprised at the characters that one, you thought the actor was dead, but apparently he's not. Right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, the opening, you mentioned that opening scene. I liked it, but as I thought about it more and more, so they did something different with this, a couple things different with this movie. One was when you jump around to different planets, they actually have
A title.
a title on the screen that tells you where you are,
Yeah.
except when you go to Darth Vader's palace.
They don't say
They
that.
don't say that, which you just assume is Mustafar.
They stopped after. They didn't do it after that.
Right.
It was like,
So
why?
there was, yeah,
Why'd you do it
it was
all?
exactly. They did it at the beginning for a
Yeah.
couple different locations,
Yeah.
but then they didn't continue to do that.
Well, I read about that one with Darth Vader because I think they wanted to leave it open to interpretation, where it could be, and I don't know the name of the planet he lives on, but it could be the one that people are familiar with, or it could have been something else. They didn't want to nail it down and make it definitive.
Okay. Well, I feel like you either do it or you don't. You either have the titles or
Right.
you don't.
Right.
Number two.
So it looked like they forgot.
Well, it's just here, and this is the core of my criticism of the movie. I know from reports that apparently Disney executives screened the first cut of the movie a couple months ago and were not happy with it and didn't like the tone and they didn't like a number of things. And they brought in another director and another writer and they paid the guy $5 million
Holy cow.
to fix the movie. To give you some perspective, J.J. Abrams got paid $10 million to write and direct
From start to finish.
The Force Awakens. So this backup director and writer got paid $5 million to fix Rogue One.
Do you know who that was?
I could look it up.
All right. Jason, look it up.
But he's the guy who did the Jason Bourne movies.
Oh.
So they wanted him to clean up the film. And so I go, okay, is that why there seems to be this muddled bit? Like sometimes they're using titles for the planet, sometimes they're not. The other thing is the
Paul
big...
Greengrass.
No.
He did all the Jason Bourne movies.
No, it wasn't him.
Okay.
It was the writer of maybe those movies. The beginning, it started kind of slow, and you kind of jump from planet to planet to planet, and there's flashbacks and everything. And I felt like, why didn't they do a crawl? Why didn't they do a title sequence like a typical Star Wars movie with da 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 da, and then
Yeah.
Star Wars shows up and it says Rogue One, and then there's 2 or 3 paragraphs of background that kind of sets things up, and then you launch right into something.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. They did have the little long ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then they jump right into the movie. There's no title. There's no Star Wars. There's no Rogue One. It wasn't there at all.
Eventually, Rogue One eventually showed up.
Did it?
Yep. After they take the engineer guy, Galen.
Right. After that opening.
Yeah, then it just says Rogue One. Because I remember I was wondering why it didn't say Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Yeah. No, that's not him either. I forget. Anyway.
Well, what I had read is they got rid of the scroll because they were separating it from, it's not a chapter, right? It's not.
Yeah, but that's the irony.
It is the opening crawl for episode 4. So.
I know, but see but that's the funny part. That's true. Is this movie fits so seamlessly with episode 4?
Right.
You're like, it's about as close to part of the Star Wars saga as you can possibly be.
It's episode 3.5.
Right. It's 3.5 or 3.8 or whatever you want to say.
I did walk away from the film scratching my head, say, why did they call this like a separate Star Wars story, you know, a standalone film? Like it's right between these two films.
Just because, and spoiler alert, Princess Leia shows up at the end. Okay, this is my other criticism. Beyond that, I felt like the beginning should have been tighter, and it could have helped to have the opening crawl with a setup and then launching right into some action. The fan service in this movie, I was so torn about it.
The fan
service, where they put things in there just to make fans
go woo,
yeah, like the blue milk. Or
right.
the walrus dude, and then we've got the death penalty on 12 Systems people. That kind of stuff, you know, C-3PO and R2-D2 have to show up, for the kind of, and you're like, okay, but I like that, I appreciate that on one level, but on another level, I'm like, that wasn't necessary for the movie. Like, that's purely to get the audience to go, oh, I remember that guy from the cantina. Remember him?
Which is what I did.
Which is what I did. That's why I'm part of it. I'm like, oh, I like that. My son had no idea who those guys were. Right? He missed it. He could care less about blue milk.
I saw it right away.
I know. But that kind of, you go, or the other one that a lot of people have been talking about is in the battle at the end, in the space battle, they had some of the pilots were that was footage from episode 4.
Which is awesome.
There was unused footage, too. They went into the archives.
I saw those, and I'm looking at these guys, I'm like, wait, they were in the movie.
Right.
These must be CG, too.
And Red 5 gets blown up.
Yeah.
Which is then
Luke's position.
Where, Luke steps into that position. Yeah. So, I mean, some of that stuff you go, okay, that's cool, but I feel like Star Wars, and this was true of The Force Awakens too a little bit also, they're relying a little bit too much on nostalgia. And I thought...
But isn't that why we're going?
I hope not.
I'm trying to recapture my childhood here.
But see, that's exactly what I think they're banking on, which is why I said, no, they could have completely screwed up 2 hours of this movie, and if they just had that Vader scene at the end, everyone would have loved it.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're going for. I'm like, okay, you cannot... I still think it was a pretty good movie. I think it was a very good movie.
You know, now that I just remembered, I remember when Episode 3 was about to come out, and people were talking about they couldn't wait to see Vader take action,
and he didn't.
Right, and it didn't even occur to me to just now, but that's what we got to see. And it was even now, that was too short. That could have been so much more.
Okay, final criticism, because I just have to do this.
All right.
The last thing is, if you go back and watch the first 2 trailers for Rogue One, I sent you a video about this.
Yeah, very different.
Not only were they different, but there were some stunning, beautiful scenes in those trailers that were not in the final movie. So there's this incredible shot of Jyn walking across the top of that tower, and this giant TIE fighter just emerges from the bottom of the screen right in front of her, and you're like, whoa. I mean, that was awesome.
That was awesome.
Not in the movie.
Right. No, well, the scenes in the movie, the TIE fighters.
Yeah, but and then there's a scene of Krennic with his long white robe walking, kind of wading through the beach water, and there's all these dead stormtroopers around him. Not in the movie. There's a scene of Vader standing in front of some kind of red display screen thing. Not in the movie. And the rumors I've been hearing and reading was that Vader was actually supposed to have a lot more time in this movie and was actually going to be the guy who took out a number of the heroes. Everyone dies in the movie, by the way. Right. All the heroes die. But he was going to take, and that's part of what the executives reacted negatively to.
Really?
Yeah, they felt, again, rumors, reports were that they felt because this movie went up right to the beginning of Star Wars Episode 4, right? That's where this movie ends, is right where episode 4 begins, that they needed to match the tone of episode 4, make it a little bit lighter, a little bit less dark, a little bit less gritty. And so they took a lot of that stuff out and changed. They said the biggest changes were in the third act of this movie, which was all the battle sequences. In the trailer, there was that great scene of Jin and Cassian and the droid running on the beach with the AT-ATs or whatever they are coming after him. That's not in the movie. So part of me is just going, okay, this movie was really good. I really enjoyed it, but was it as good as it could have been?
Well, they might release that'd be awesome. They could release a second film, like the director's cut.
Yeah,
or whatever.
I don't know if they will, but okay. Now that brings us to something borrowed.
Yes,
because there's a significant part of the movie we haven't talked about yet, which relates to an article that you found. So introduce kind of the issue here.
All right, so it's from the Independent, and in the movie, what's the general's name?
Grand Moff Tarkin.
Tarkin. The question was if this character who plays a big role in A New Hope was going to be in Rogue One. In the film, you see him from behind, you see his face in a reflection, and you think that's all you're going to get. Then he turns around and boom, there he is. And,
yeah.
I mean, and he isn't. There's a whole dialogue.
He's got a lot of screen time.
He does.
And Peter Cushing, who's the actor who played him in the original Star Wars movie, died in 1994.
Right. So what they did is they had another actor, and they did CGI to make him look like the original actor, which, and the article's question was, hey, that was great, but is it ethical? And so I thought we could talk about the ethics of it, but also did it work and so forth. What it made me think of, I was in high school, and there was a magazine, it was Time or Newsweek, and they had a headshot of a woman on it. And just an average looking, nothing striking about her, just headshot. And the tagline was, "This woman does not exist." And there was new technology where in Photoshop you could take someone's eyes and nose and hair and mix and match, and there's a picture of a human being that's never existed before. And it was creepy because you're like, this looks like a real person.
And it isn't like just a painting of
No,
something.
no,
Right?
it's a photograph.
Right,
yeah,
right.
it's photographed. I believe it was in that article they said in the future, we'll be able to have Casablanca Part 2 with Humphrey Bogart, right?
Yeah.
And things like that, where you actors who have died, John Wayne and so forth, and because of CGI and so forth. And so we've seen this kind of stuff before, but this is the first time I've seen it where they've taken an actor who has since died or has gotten old and they can't play their part anymore and plays an actual role, where they're not just standing in the background or something.
Right.
One, I thought it was cool. I never questioned the ethics until I read this article. Now I'm wondering about the ethics of it. But I will admit, as I'm watching it, every chance I got, it was distracting to me because I wanted to, it's always off. There's just, I can't put my finger on it. It's something, they just haven't.
They call it the uncanny valley.
Okay.
Have you heard that term? Yeah. It's just, you can't explain it, but there's something in the human brain that when it sees it, knows this isn't quite right.
Right.
And that's sort of the holy grail of CGI, of getting to the place where you overcome the uncanny valley and you truly trick the human mind into believing it's real. And they haven't done it yet.
Well, right. And I think part of it is you and I knew the guy was dead.
Right.
And we knew this was CGI. I didn't ask my kids, but it didn't seem to bother them. Like my 9-year-old son didn't care.
Well, you know, if we base the world on what bothers a 9-year-old
I know,
kid,
but I mean, that's what these movies are made for most of the time, right?
we would never have clean laundry.
That's true.
So I agree with you. So there's a couple pieces of information here. So Peter Cushing died in 94. The filmmakers did ask his family and estate or whoever legally is in charge of his permission to do this. So they didn't just do it. They asked permission, so they got it and all this. And then legally, ethically, fine.
Yeah.
Right, cool. There was one other example.
Next week he's going to be on Kentucky Fried Chicken commercials.
Right.
You know.
Dancing with the Stars. Dancing with the Dead Stars. Apparently, Paul Walker, he was in the Fast and Furious movies. He died in that tragic car crash, I don't know, a year or two ago. And he was filming one of those movies at the time, and they had to finish the movie. And apparently his brother stood in for him in the filming, and then they digitally put Paul Walker's face onto his brother to complete some of the scenes in the movie.
Was there dialogue, or was he just standing in the background?
I'm not entirely sure, but everyone has said that this deal in Rogue One is by far the biggest attempt at trying to do this. And again, Gareth Edwards, he's come out since the movie was released and said that he was terrified about the idea of trying to recreate a main character like this. And he knew that if they couldn't absolutely do it, it shouldn't be done. I really didn't like it.
Oh.
I mean, I could have handled if it was a cameo. Like, they did the same thing with Princess Leia.
Right.
Although
I thought hers was worse.
Carrie Fisher's not dead yet, though.
Right.
Yeah, and hers was brief, right? It was just a few seconds.
It was brief. It was cool. I thought it was cool. We got to see Princess Leia, but I thought he was more convincing. The CGI was than she.
It may have been, but he had a lot more screen time. Like, this wasn't just a glimpse or even a scene. He came back multiple scenes and had a lot of dialogue and interaction with other characters. So he was a pivotal component of the movie.
Yeah.
And every time he came on screen, it just pulled me out of the movie every single time.
Yeah.
Like, I was looking for CG discrepancies. I wasn't paying attention to what they were saying. It looked kind of creepy because he's acting on screen with real human beings.
Right.
It isn't like other CGI characters.
Right. And it is a person walking around.
Right.
I mean, the body you see is actually.
Here's what gives me hope. Star Wars has a history, at least Lucas did when he owned it, of going back and monkeying around with movies as technology improved. And I thought someday they're going to go back, and when it's really there, they'll remake Tarkin again, and it'll look really good.
Okay.
But I guarantee we're gonna look back on this movie 5-10 years from now and watch that scene or those scenes with the CG Tarkin and go, oh, that's so 2016.
Don't you kind of do that with Jabba the Hutt? When he, with his mouth and his tongue.
See, that's the funny thing is I don't. I don't. Like, when you go back and watch Jedi, Jabba was a practical effects puppet.
Right.
And he looks like he's actually there.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't have all the facial articulation, all that of a normal slug monster. But it works. But you go back and watch Jabba in the prequels.
Oh, that's terrible.
It's horrible. Yeah. Or I was recently watching the first Harry Potter movie again with my daughter, who was reading the book, the very first Harry Potter movie, when they do the broomstick flying scene. I mean, it is so bad.
Oh.
I mean, the CG is so bad. I mean, at the time, I'm sure it was like, holy God, I can't believe they did it. So I felt like, again, in the name of fan service, they really wanted Tarkin in this thing. And I think it was against their better judgment. They went for it. I mean, I'd say it's the best, most realistic human CG we've ever seen. It's not Polar Express.
Oh, that is the creepiest.
It is creepy. But it's still not there. And when it pulls you out of the movie and it's done for fan service alone, you're like, Like, you could have given a number of those scenes to Vader and been like, Vader could have been the person who was having those scenes with some.
That's a good point.
And the thing that's great about Vader is he's like eternal. He doesn't have to be CG.
Right.
You just get some big oaf in a mask, and you go, we'll recreate James Earl Jones' voice digitally. You can do that more easily than a face. So
where do you think it's going to go from here?
I think it's
like, generally speaking.
Well, there's some, like in Civil War, Captain America Civil War, they took Robert Downey Jr. and they aged him back to when he was like a teen.
Yeah.
And like those kinds of things I think are okay because they're small snippets in a movie. They're not major components. The idea of resurrecting dead actors and making them significant players in a film, I'm hoping doesn't become a trend. Although I suspect it will.
Oh, it absolutely will. Like,
because Hollywood's all about sequels and making money off of known quantities.
Yeah. Like, if you look at Forrest Gump, there were a lot of little snippets of famous people, but they took actual footage and then they tried to animate the mouths or whatever.
Right.
Like, those have been good examples where they could have had quick snippets.
Yeah. So to bridge over into the church world, since we're supposed to be Christian on this podcast,
this will be good.
There was a video done a number of years ago, which I believe is still on YouTube, by the Gospel Coalition. And it was a number of large church pastors. I think Mark Driscoll may have been in on it, possibly Francis Chan, but James McDonald was on it, who I believe you go to Harvest, don't you?
Yeah.
But not the same.
Not his Harvest.
So they were all talking about video preaching. And is that a good idea for a large church to use one pastor and kind of broadcast them via video to a bunch? Or is it better to develop new pastors who can also speak and kind of spread that responsibility around?
Oh, how long ago was this video?
Oh, my goodness. 5-7 years ago.
Okay, I'm curious.
Go look it up. It's really interesting. And James McDonald is a very strong advocate for video preaching.
Really?
Like, he's like, this is why we need to do it. And he talks about how there's like 1 talent preachers and 5 talent preachers and 10 talent preachers and 100 talent preachers. 'Cause he's a parable of the talents kind of
Yeah.
thing. And hey, if you got a 100-talent preacher, why wouldn't you use him, right? So then there's another person, I forget who it is, who's kind of sparring with James McDonald about the pros and cons of this video preaching thing. And finally the guy says, well, what happens when you're gone? What happens when you die?
Yeah.
And the church is completely dependent on you and your video preaching.
DVD.
And James McDonald says, why would that stop them from using my teaching?
Wow.
So he actually thinks, I don't know if he still feels this way, but at the time he felt, even when he's dead and gone, the church will continue to use his old videos for the preaching of the word.
And now they'll be able to make new ones, and no one will know.
That's true, because you can digitally recreate James McDonald, right? But I think there's a similar ethical issue going on here, because of all people, we as Christians should believe in the value of incarnation, right? I mean, it's Christmas time. We believe that it mattered that God came and dwelt among us in the flesh. He didn't send a hologram. He didn't just send a letter, an actual person. And that's what Christian ministry has always been. It has been life on life, people on people, shepherding one another through that. But over the last 100 years or so, we've become more and more disincarnate, both as a culture and as a church, because we've bought into technology.
Yeah.
Radio, video, and the mega church is built on that premise. Well, we can broadcast now to, I mean, who cares if you're watching a guy on a screen who's been dead for 5 years? When you show up at the church, you're just watching a guy on a big screen anyway, because he's so far away from you, you can't make out his face anyway.
Right.
It's a mega, what are those things called? Jumbotron kind of
Okay.
preaching. But I think there's a danger in here that's now going to come, an ethical question that is impacting Hollywood, which is it right and ethical to recreate performances of dead actors, even if you get their family or their estate's consent? Similarly, is it right and ethical to continue to build living churches on dead teaching? And it's not the same as reading a book or a letter from Paul, who's been dead for 2,000 years. It's different when you're taking video and saying, this is going to continue to be our preacher in perpetuity. I think it's a fascinating question. And it's going to be hitting us soon, because as more and more of these megachurch leaders retire or die or whatever, and you don't get replacements, there will be that temptation to rely on this kind of technology and just plain old video to keep it going.
So just because you can, should you?
Exactly. And even just because it works, should you? Because that's often when you make a utilitarian ethic, well, if it works, it's okay.
Well, now I'm thinking Tarkin shouldn't have been in the movie. I'm changed my mind.
I see. This is what I do. I make you question everything. I loved the movie. I was so excited. Like I said, it's the prequel I always wanted. I think its strengths far outweigh its weaknesses. I am concerned about fan service, and I didn't like the Tarkin thing so much. I'm glad. I wish they had him in there for a brief scene, maybe, but they put so much time on that
Right.
character. I was like, Anyway, that's my.
So do you take this movie to be viewed again?
Heck yeah. Absolutely. I will be
right.
buying the Blu-ray.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. And I hope they have a lot of special features, including all the scenes that got
Oh,
cut.
that'd be great.
Yeah. So this is okay. We've probably already gone long for sure, but it was worth it. Quickly, something that blew your mind or blew chunks that you saw recently.
All right, blew my mind was the Martin Scorsese's trailer for Silence.
Oh yeah.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Yes, I'm very excited. 25 years in the making. Already, all kinds of articles being written about this.
Have you read the book?
No.
Read the book.
Oh, okay.
Before you see the movie. It's not a long book.
Oh.
It's not a long book. It's one of my all-time favorite novels.
Okay.
You have to read the book.
I'll read the book.
Okay. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but something that absolutely blew chunks. When I was flying internationally recently, I had to watch a lot of movies to make the time pass, and I watched Suicide Squad. I had to bring it back from the dungeons of my
You
mind.
didn't bring it up last week on the podcast. You mentioned that you saw it.
Yeah.
And I just watched it this past
It
weekend.
is so horrifically bad. Like on every level, it's awful. Like I would not have watched that. I would have walked out of the theater if it wasn't at 40,000 feet. I really would have. It was that bad. And at this point, Warner Brothers, Wonder Woman is your only hope. And if you do not sell me on Wonder Woman, I'm out. I am not going
No
back.
Justice League?
No, I will not spend money at the theater on Justice League. I will watch it on a streaming service that I already subscribe to, but I will not go to the theater for Justice League if Wonder Woman is not at least tolerable to sit through in the theater.
I'll take it as far as Justice League, but that'll be my ending
Oh my
point.
goodness, you have more fortitude than I do. Okay, thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you thought about Rogue One, Tarkin, Should there have been an opening crawl? Was there too much fan service? What do you think of the great Vader slaughter at the end?
Moral ambiguity.
Moral ambiguity. And do you think your pastor should stay on video or get real in the flesh?
Get real.
All right. Thank you for watching. You can kiss this episode goodbye.
You may fire when ready.
What?
You're far too trusting.